into our afternoon agenda, which begins on item 11, Public Works. We have a public hearing and order number 22-08-09-07 in the matter of referring to the voters of Lane County a 5-year local option levy that invests in Lane County parks by enhancing water and trail access, improving public amenities, leveraging partnerships to enhance recreational opportunities, and ensuring the preservation of these natural resources for future generations. Mr. Moker, I will move forward, and I'll ask you if you'll introduce your panel and begin the process.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. This will be maybe a little redundant for all of you from comments made last week when we go ahead.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Moker. One thing I did neglect to mention is you'll see 4 county commissioners here. We are, in fact, all here. Commissioner Bernie is, you can see his wonderful face up there on the screen. He is with us virtually today.
Thank you, Chair.
One of the positive remnants of the pandemic has been the ability to have as many folks present as possible, even if not in person. So great to have all 5 commissioners here with us. And last week we provided some comments, and this will be a little redundant for you all, but I just want to set the context for why we're here today and what has led to this moment. So Brett Henry, our parks manager, is here, and he will walk through the proposed language for the ballot measure. You did receive some public comment this morning, and it appears there are individuals here to comment this afternoon for the public hearing. And just to note for folks who are watching and listening in that the possible action that the board would take today is to refer this measure to the ballot this November, which would ask local property taxpayers to assist in funding our park system, both for ongoing deferred maintenance needs as well as capital improvements for our park system. But from historical context, to say it's been almost 4 years now, since the board approved the Parks Master Plan. And at that point, it was over a decade. So 4 years ago, when the board approved in December of 2018, when the board approved the Parks Master Plan update, it had been over a decade since that master plan had been updated. And we went through an extensive process with our Parks Advisory Committee over several years and consultants to update that Parks Master Plan. We then did further feasibility study and identifying the needs in terms of deferred maintenance and capital improvements to our park system. And in the, I'm trying to remember it was 2020, early 2020, when the Parks Funding Task Force. 2019, it was late 2019 and early. I actually remember Commissioner Buck and I were talking about this yesterday at the Navigation Center opening. My 10-year-old was there yesterday, and this would have been 3 years ago that my now 10-year-old and Commissioner Buck's daughter were at the kickoff of the Parks Funding Task Force when we seated that group, and they met shortly before the pandemic hit. And so this was a group of residents from throughout Lane County that came together, that was appointed by the Board of Commissioners. We proposed this Parks Funding Task Force to further the work that had been set in motion by the Parks Master Plan update. We put the Parks Funding Task Force in place to say, how do we now actually move forward and fund the maintenance and improvements to this valued park system that we have. So that group of Lane County residents met through 2019 and really through the pandemic virtually, and made recommendations to the board October 19th, 2021. That was presented to the board. And then in February 1st of this year, the Parks Funding Implementation Work Plan was discussed with the board. So this recommendation that's before you to consider referring to local taxpayers, to local voters, a tax levy increase to fund maintenance and capital improvements of our parks really comes from the residents of our community who participated both in the Parks Master Plan update process and the Parks Funding Task Force over the last several years. So I'm going to now turn it. You also will have an item after this one to follow up from last week's action on the appointment of the explanatory statement committee. But this item is to review and discuss the proposed ballot language that would go on the November ballot. So I'm going to ask Brett Henry, our Parks Manager, to walk through that language, and then we'll take any questions you have.
Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. Those were some wonderful comments. I also have some comments to make ahead of a presentation that I was planning to give. I will be repeating some of what Steve, Mr. Murkowski just reiterated to you, kind of the process of this whole, funding of the parks, and, and I thinking back to when I just started 4 years ago, that was like first thing on my mind is I knew that we needed more resources. And so it's definitely been a long process as we've gone through this. So I want to thank you for your time. There's such a critical need for this Lane County Parks levy. Our parks are essential to the quality of life here in Lane County. They provide affordable access to recreation that is within several hours driving distance to every county resident. Parks provide public spaces for every county resident. Our parks provide, they're a part of the fabric of our community, so they bring people together, they bring our friends together. They allow us to connect. Couples share wedding memories. Children experience nature through exploration. They're also places of unforgettable moments. My son caught his first fish at a Lane County park. I'll never forget that. He also likes to participate in scavenger hunts, and that's been kind of his way to discover nature out at our parks. And so I'll hide some, what I call little treasures for him to find. And he's been able to really discover quite a bit about nature and about our parks through those scavenger hunts. Over the past 30 months, we worked hard to keep our parks open and fully operational, even with increased visitation, which has spiked since the pandemic. Our parks are in need of a reinvestment, as the lack of dedicated funding over the past 40 years has prevented essential upgrades to the facilities that Lane County parks provide. The campgrounds, trails, natural areas, boat ramps, and marina docks are critical assets within our parks that make Lane County such a great place to live. A reinvestment will also allow us to establish new partnerships to improve the recreation experience within the county. Cooperative investments and projects with other agencies and private organizations leverages funding and creates a better return on our investment. For instance, safety and security is a growing concern within our parks as well. So funds are dedicated to partner with the Lane County Sheriff's Office for a dedicated offer to assist with regular patrols. Today, I'm presenting background on how Lane County parks were funded since their inception. And this was quite a while ago. And it kind of surprised me how long these parks have been around. So it's very interesting just to kind of look at the history of things. Afterwards, I will review the process that began with the adoption of a master plan and the appointment of the Parks Funding Task Force that Steve mentioned by the Board of County Commissioners. The task force recommended a funding plan that consisted of a local option levy with funding categories to address the operational budget, but also designate fundings that facilitate collaboration with other agencies and organizations. And, I'm going to repeat that quite a lot because I think we need to facilitate more collaboration with other agencies. I'll then explain how the findings from the two assessments of park infrastructure condition allowed us to prioritize our investments within the proposed levy. Next, we reached out to the public through regional meetings to better understand what improvements were important to them within their regional parks. The feedback we received through community engagement informed our project decisions within the funding categories that are in the proposed levy. I'll end then with a brief slideshow that highlights the benefits the parks provide and why it is so important to reinvest in our Lane County parks. me start this presentation and hopefully I can get it right. So at the beginning of parks, there was a lot of funding that went towards acquisition and growth. And which the reason why that was, why that happened is because there was a lot of revenue as far as the timber revenue, the gas tax, and some general fund that the parks were getting at that time. And so by the middle of the 70s, the park system began to grow. And actually at that time, there were over 70 parks and 35 full-time employees. So by the early 80s, the park system had grown so large that it was not properly maintained. And so that also kind of coupled with the loss of timber revenue, redistribution of gas tax, and the loss of general fund. So there was really no stable source there for maintenance and operation. And in 1982, the final coup de grace was the Great Recession, and Lane County parks were closed for a full year. So in 83, they opened back up, but they knew that they had become more streamlined, and they also needed a new funding plan or a new strategy. And so there really was more of an emphasis of increasing user fees to eliminate the reliance on general fund. And parks, as I said, became more streamlined, down to 59 with 17 full-time employees. And that's the way they operated in 1999. Now you look today, not much has changed. And so, we're talking 30 years later, and there's not a lot difference in our revenue sources. User fees still comprise about half of the overall revenue. You look at our camping and the RV registration fees, which are associated with camping, it makes up about 1/3 of our revenue. You add in the emissions, then we get about half of our revenue. We receive no property taxes. However, we do receive transient room tax, or what's called hotel tax, and car rental taxes. Those lodging taxes are primarily subsidized by visitors from outside of the county. So as it stands, depending so much on user fees, really we rely on the economy and we rely on visitation. So that can really fluctuate. And I think you can go out to Orchard Point or Richardson and walk around and see that the user fees are not enough to sustain our park system. So with this slide, you can see pictures of some what is called deferred maintenance that's happened over the years. You look at the concrete revetment there on the left. That one was able to be repaired, but we also, as Commissioner Farr had mentioned before, have some issues with our revetments there along Fern Ridge, both at Richardson and at Orchard Point. Look at our gangplank there, which we want to be accessible and we want to be safe. And so, it's rotting, it's deteriorating. And so the picture on the right is of a courtesy dock, and you can see how it's collapsed. So there were 2 facility condition assessments, and they looked at the 17 parks that contain the most infrastructure to allow us to get an idea of what our capital needs were, as well as prioritize how we were going to work on tackling this maintenance backlog. So our current capital needs are close to $22 million. If there are no significant investments made in the next 10 years, that grows to over $38 million. As Steve had mentioned earlier, the Board of County Commissioners, they approved the Lane County Park and Open Space Master Plan back in December 2018. And so this master plan really set things in motion. And so the vision basically says our thriving parks and natural areas should be protected for future generations. And going back to the goal, which is generate economic vitality, there's a strategy under that goal that says explore stable long-term operational funding. And so when I was hired in July of 2017 or 2018, sorry, that was my mission, to look for sustainable funding that I knew was critical for park operation. So the Parks Funding Task Force, as Steve had mentioned earlier, that came about in late 2019. And this was actually directed to the county administrator from the Board of County Commissioners. And so this group, this task force, their goal was to find sustainable sources of funding and provide a recommendation back to the county commissioners. And so they had a total of 10 meetings over 17 months, I believe. And, you know, that, as Steve had said, was during the pandemic. So every meeting was remote except that first one. And so we pushed through. And what we found is we needed to prioritize where the investments were going to go. And so you see the 5 priorities in front of you: park maintenance and operation, the backlog of deferred maintenance, stewardship of our habitats, providing environmental and cultural educational programs for both youth and adults, and focusing on projects that generate a net revenue. So the task force made their recommendation, and that happened in 2021. And so the centerpiece of this recommendation is a $6 million 5-year local option levy. They also asked for $500,000 a year from general fund, from the county general fund, and retention of what we're already getting as far as the hotel tax, the transient room tax, and the car rental tax. So altogether, this generates $37.5 million over a 5-year period. We needed to find out more from the residents on what they wanted to see at their parks, what kind of improvements were on the top of their minds. So we had 4 community meetings that happened this past May. And we went out to Florence for the West region. We went out to Cottage Grove for the South region, here in Eugene for the Metro region for Springfield and Eugene. And we went out to Leesburg Fire Station for the McKenzie corridor. And what we really heard is people want more access to these recreational options that we offer. So we have lots of boating facilities, but they want access to those facilities, and they want improved accessible access. And so that's going to be a theme, you know, throughout this presentation, is accessibility. It's really important. A lot of our infrastructure was built in the 60s and 70s when accessibility was not required and was not really thought about. Folks also wanted more recreation options. And so, you know, we can't provide all these options. You know, we are limited. So we're looking to partner with other groups to provide those options for county residents. Also, they just want to see improvements to restrooms. You know, a lot of these restrooms have not been refurbished or replaced, and they're way past their timeline. So the comments we got through the community meetings were incorporated into this proposed levy. Accessibility. So this is something that's very important. And what we plan to do is ADA accessibility assessment and transition plan. So essentially looking at our facilities and seeing what should be an ADA requirement, and making those necessary changes. But it's not just ADA, it's also, you know, folks had different ability levels, and we need to take that into consideration. So Some wheelchair facilities are going to be needed, but also looking at our trails. A lot of them have barriers and are not universally accessible. So we have this opportunity, especially at Howard Buford Park, where we have nearly 30 miles of trails, to make these changes, these improvements. Something that really sticks with me back when I worked in Louisiana before I came here was there was this project where a mother came to me and was really concerned about her son not being able to play at any playgrounds, that the equipment was just too difficult for him to navigate. And so he had his challenges. And I worked with that individual and some other parents, and we were able to raise enough money to build a fully inclusive playground and nature play area at one of the parks I managed there. And just, you know, seeing the ribbon cutting and those kids that were actually able to go out there and play instead of having to sit on the sidelines while their children, you know, played or while their friends played, you know, really was a moving experience. And I'd like to do the same thing here. And we have some opportunity, you know, with this proposed levy to do that. So the improvements that we're proposing are widespread throughout the county. For instance, at North Jetty, that is the, number one really location to access the beach there in the Florence area. And people are still, despite the conditions of the facility, accessing the beach, but there's essentially a moon crater in that parking lot. So we need to have an engineer look at it, look at the drainage situation and completely redo that parking area, or thinking about, is that the right area for parking? Also, there are no public restrooms. You know, we're looking at improving that amenity, but also the accessibility to get to the beach itself isn't there. Folks have to climb over these dunes, and on a hot day that can be pretty overwhelming, especially when, like myself, I have a 6-year-old and a 1-year-old, and trying to get them there is very difficult. So carrying all that, you know, gear and everything. So I think, you know, we have an opportunity for elevated boardwalk to help folks access the beach. Again, access is our theme here. At Armitage, more options for camping, looking at both tent camping and RV camping. Looking again at, Baker Bay. Baker Bay is one of those parks that, because it's so far away from where our maintenance center is located here in Eugene, does not get the attention it deserves. And we've seen it deteriorate over the years. This gives us an opportunity to make some much needed improvements to the day use facilities and the campgrounds there. And I'm really excited about an opportunity to do that. And at HBRA, as I mentioned earlier, and for those who don't know, that's Howard Buford Park or Mount Pisgah. There are some needed improvements to the trails. Now, we can't make these standards applicable to all the trails because so many of them have too much relief. But some of the trails that are close to the river there's a potential to make them universally accessible to meet that standard and to remove a lot of barriers. So working with the Mount Pisgah Arboretum and the Friends of Buford Park, we have a wonderful opportunity to do that there. Conservation. So stewarding our parks, protecting what we have into the future is really important, but also looking at, controlling greenhouse gases and those kind of things that parks provide on a much bigger level. We have currently one electric vehicle charging station out at Howard Buford Park in the Arboretum. We'd like to add a couple more. Invasive species removal. It's a real problem. Not just your typical Himalayan blackberries, but vegetation like English ivy is choking a lot of the trees, especially at those parks that are close to waterways. Then looking at bank erosion, looking at the riparian and floodplain restoration that we can do with this, at least maintain the water quality that we have. It's very important. Zumwalt Park, for instance, they've been waiting a long time for us to be able to maintain that shoreline there. And we just haven't been able to do it because we haven't had the resources and funding. This will allow us to do it. Educational programming. So I think this is really vital in a park system to be able to bring in people to explore nature on their own in their own way, but have some structured programming around it. Mount Pisgah Arboretum does a wonderful job of that. And observing some of their programs, I've been very impressed. They work with other groups as well, including they provide some bilingual interpretive programming and guided nature walks, and we'd like to help with that. What we heard from a lot of people is they need more birding information. Just a bird list, I think, would be really important. There's an application called iNaturalist that we regularly contribute to, but being able to put something like that on our website and publicize, hey, you can see these birds at our parks. Again, partnering with other organizations. Blue River Park is one of those where there's the Kennedy school that's just right across the way. We can partner with them and have an outdoor school at that park. Right now, it's just sitting there. But there's some other partners where we can engage the youth as well. And so this gives us that opportunity to have an environmental coordinator, education coordinator that can work with some of these other groups and establish more programming in our parks. So waterway access projects, we have the facilities. The problem is our facilities are not in great condition. So we looked across the county and decided on 11 facilities. Some didn't quite make the cut, but working with the Oregon State Marine Board, we really wanted to know what they were prioritizing because they have a very strong program. It's a facility grant program there. And this will allow us to leverage funding through this levy. It's a 25-75 match, which is outstanding. And they provide the engineering expertise with these projects. We're working on a couple of projects with them right now, one at HBRA, another one at Forest Glen. So as you can see, these projects are spread throughout the county. And we're talking about really improving these facilities, making sure that our boat ramps are accessible both for motorized and non-motorized, providing the river map trails. And so, when you look at the McKenzie River and what's going on up there, you can see that it's an untapped resource. I believe it could be a river trail that's designated similar to the Willamette River Trail, but there needs to be more information about, where the put in and takeout spots are for the river guides, and just more general information about that river, especially since that area, at least a portion of that area, was impacted by the Holiday Farm fire. And so, we want to improve some of these facilities along the McKenzie River as well. Cooperative projects. So there are a lot of these. I mentioned the environmental education programs with the Arboretum. Something we saw at each and every one of our community meetings was tons of pickleball folks. So, and so this is the fastest growing sport in America, and I can see why. There's really a lot of buzz around pickleball, and I don't think it's a fad. Honestly, I think that it's something that's going to be here to last, and it actually has been here for a while. So we have pledged to partner with the Emerald Valley Pickleball Club to assist them with an investment they have towards a regional facility at Lane Community College. Also, when you get back to looking at Howard Buford Park, we want work with the Friends of Buford Park, and there's an opportunity for more habitat stewardship. There's often years where we're not able to do prescribed burning because we simply don't have the funding. And prescribed burning is a wonderful preventative measure for fires, as well as, the benefits that it provides for habitat. The McKenzie River, and you know that it was really devastated by the Holiday Farm fire. And so we wanted to pick out 2 projects that were really impacted by the fire. And we looked at Blue River, that area. It was hit very, very hard. I mean, that city was hardly recognizable afterwards. McKenzie River Trust has a wonderful project, Finrock Reach, and they've been looking for funding. And we have an opportunity to team up with them and provide that. And it also benefits us because we have other boating facilities along the McKenzie River as well. A park that's really interesting there in Blue River, and it's a small park, and I actually have not been there and have not seen it, but I have spoken with Mr. Tony Cassad, and they are really in need of a public restroom. In fact, I'm going out there next week to visit with him. And that park was really impacted by the fire, and we could really help them out. They're a small parks district that doesn't receive any kind of stable funding. And so they're really reaching out for help, and we have that opportunity to provide that. So there were 2 public opinion surveys conducted, the first one in March of 2021, and the second one about a year later in May of this year. And the findings, really, we were looking at, what is the public support for funding parks in general, and how much are folks willing to pay? And so in the first survey, we saw a 59% support for a tax measure to fund and improve parks. And folks were willing to pay more than $40 a year, but we felt like a nice sweet spot was the 62% favorability for $40 a year. That's why I'm pointing that one out. So looking at the second survey, again, the support really didn't wane. 61% for a 5-year levy at 16 cents per 1,000 tax assessed property value. So even when we made it more specific that this would be a property tax, we still saw, in fact, we saw a little bit of increased support. And again, people were willing to pay up to $40 a year. So that stayed very consistent and really said that the task force recommendation was spot on at a 5-year local option levy. And so even back then, we were thinking around 16 cents per 1,000 assessed value. That has stayed very consistent. So what we're proposing here today is a 5-year local option levy at 16 cents per 1,000 assessed value. And this will cost the median Lane County homeowner about approximately $38 a year for 5 years. And so when you reduce it down per month, it's down to $1.41 a month. And so the levy itself will total $31 million over 5 years. So we really think it's a really good return on the investment. It allows us to make some real significant improvements to our park facilities, to have the capability to maintain these investments that we're making through our operations. We can do more environmental stewardship to preserve these parks into the future. And it also gives us a wonderful opportunity to collaborate with other organizations. So I'm going to show you a brief slideshow here of our parks and some of the facilities that we offer the Lane County citizens. And then I'll provide a short closing. So you can see the diversity of parks that we have throughout the county and the different kind of.
I have a better
facilities.
slideshow than that.
I know, I actually have a better one than that as well. And that's what I want to do, very brief, and just kind of show, that we have so many facilities throughout the county, and in how people use our parks. It's these parks are used, they're well used, but they're worn out, obviously. And so I do want to close with a few comments. Thank you, commissioners, for your support and guidance throughout this whole process. You now have the opportunity to lead a lasting legacy through your vote today. By voting yes to place a funding measure on the ballot, you are empowering the citizens of Lane County to make their choice to reinvest in our parks. So thank you very much again. And I'm here if you guys have any comments or questions for me. And I really appreciate the support throughout this whole long process of several years.
Thank you for that great staff report, Mr. Henry and Ms. Mokrajski. Anything to add before I turn it over for questions? Excuse me, questions. Then to the board, questions or comments on the staff presentation? I'm looking toward Commissioner Burney. I see none at this point in time. Then we'll move forward. Any follow-up, anything you'd like to add?
No, Chair.
And at this point, I'm going to open the public hearing. For the public hearing, you'll have a chance to speak at the mic for 3 minutes. Keep an eye on the clock on this wall over here, not that wall over there. We know that's inaccurate. You'll see 3 minutes. Just keep an eye on that. And at 3 minutes, I'll ask you to conclude, or then we'll move along to the next speaker. We have 9 speakers signed up in-house. We have 2 speakers online at this point in time. So we'll do the in-house speakers, the people who are present for speaking first. When I call your name, I'll call your name and the next speaker to the mic. Please step to the mic, identify yourself, and be prepared to deliver your testimony in 3 minutes. We'll begin public testimony. I will now open the public hearing. We'll begin testimony with Jim Mayo, who will be followed by Tom Hoyt.
You, Jim Mayo. I'm currently the chair of the Parks Advisory Committee. I was also on the Parks Funding Task Force. And I just want to reiterate what Brett said about the work of that group of people in this process. It was really, I have to point out that Bob Kiefer did a wonderful job of facilitating this process through one public meeting, and the rest were on Zoom meetings, which was challenging at times, as I'm sure you guys have experienced. But through that whole process, we came up with this proposal, and it was unanimous among that task force as well as the Parks Advisory Committee. So I just want to say, there's a lot of support for this, and I think I can, just by the number of people here from the Pickleball Society, I mean, these are energetic people that are going to be behind this and supporting this during the upcoming election. So I just want to say thank you for your support through the last several years of putting together the master plan and the whole thing that led up to this. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayo. Next is Tom Hoyt, will be followed by Brad Von Apple.
Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Tom Hoyt. I appear before you today as a immediate past president of the McKenzie River Discovery Center and a board member, and as a board member of the McKenzie River Guides. I might indicate that yesterday the McKenzie River Guides was able to welcome and honor and present a nice plaque to Congressman Peter DeFazio for his 36 years of protecting the McKenzie River. And then we took him on a 7-boat fishing trip and had a wonderful time. And it just proved how ready we are to use our building. We have internet at our building on the McKenzie. We can host meetings there. We have heated, handicap-approved bathrooms and 46 acres, wonderful outdoor education and hiking. And it's now a a classroom for how to take care of a forest that was decimated 25% by fire. We've planted 5,000 trees after removing a lot of diseased trees that had root rot, and we were able to take out some of the burnt trees. We left a number of wildlife trees, and we have a spot on your property, which we have a 99-year lease on, but a spot where we did not harvest any of the burnt trees, but want to leave them there as an example of what happens after a fire. Well, I want to support, and the McKenzie River Guides and the McKenzie River Discovery Center want to support this levy in any way possible. And so we're here to offer our unmitigated and complete support. And I appreciate Mr. Henry's comment about how the dream is to bring environmental education and opportunities for children to enjoy the park that are that we're going to want to improve. The McKenzie River Discovery Center has a park. It's ready to do that, and we're so proud that we're just completing with volunteer labor and a handicap accessible trail all the way around our pond that will soon have out in the pond 7 pods for kids to fish on and a bridge that goes through it. And Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife has helped us with that. And so children will be fishing up there next year. Well, please let us know how we can help, and I hope it gets on the ballot. Thank you.
Mr. Hoyt, thank you very much. Brad Van Apple will be followed by John Clark.
Thank you, Chair and County Commissioners, and thank you, Brett, for your great presentation. My name is Brad Van Apple. I'm the Executive Director of Mount Pisgah Arboretum, and I also served on the Parks Funding Task Force. On behalf of the Arboretum, I would like to express our strong support for asking Lane County voters to approve a 5-year local option levy to help fund county parks. In previous decades, local citizens made substantial long-term investments in parks and natural areas. Thanks to those investments, Lane County now provides residents and visitors with a variety of beautiful, engaging, and ecologically diverse parks. Like anything of value, the county's investment in parks requires an ongoing commitment of care. In recent decades, Lane County has struggled to adequately fund its park system. This has resulted in a growing backlog of deferred maintenance and county properties that are falling well short of their potential to serve the public. Parks are a community asset. They enhance the quality of life for all Lane County residents. Parks are where Lane County residents spend quiet time in nature, bond with our families, and connect with our community. This has never been more apparent than during the pandemic, when the outdoors was the only place that felt safe and comfortable for many people. Access to parks and green space is important to physical and mental health, and preserving natural areas is critical to the health of the planet. Public parks belong to everyone in our community. Relying on user fees means citizens who don't have adequate financial resources are excluded from enjoying the benefits of our parks. The future of our community and our planet depends on people understanding and caring for the natural world that sustains us. And understanding only comes with having access, exposure, and education. Parks provide an opportunity to engage people of all ages and backgrounds in learning about and caring for the natural world. At Mount Pisgah Arboretum, we've been teaching people about nature for nearly 50 years. We believe that the more we all learn about and engage with the natural world, the more we will care for and preserve it for future generations. The levy funds will support nature education for children and engage underserved communities in our parks. Parks are an investment for the future. With a growing population and shrinking green spaces, it's more important than ever to care for our remaining natural areas. People today enjoy the benefits we've inherited from past generations. The time is ripe to ask Lane County voters to honor past investments and support our parks for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Appel. Next is John Clark, who will be followed by Eric Wold.
Good afternoon. My name is John Clark, and I was part of the financial task team. And I retired in 2015. I was with Eugene Parks and Open Space for 31 years. So I have a pretty good understanding of what parks need. And I can just say that I believe Lane County Parks is woefully underfunded. They had probably as many people on their staff through the whole county that I had just on my team. And I've watched, over the years, I've watched Lane County transfer ownership of Alton Bickford Park, a couple of the boat landings, Aubrey Park, and other areas over to the city of Eugene because they couldn't take care of them. I also am a volunteer at Zumwalt Park and have been for 14 years. And we've been asking for all 14 years to fix the bank erosion that's there. I mean, we've lost one tree and we'll lose more. I mean, if you go out and look at it, half of the roots of the tree are just hanging out in the air out over where the lake is. It's also, completely overrun with invasive species, which is really beyond our ability as a group of volunteers. But I've also seen that park. I've been visiting it since the mid 70s. And when it used to have a restroom and a ball field and a boat ramp. And I've just watched it go, deteriorate. And I mean, the reason we even became volunteers is because they closed it down. They were fining people for walking in the park. So the neighbors came together and said, we'll take care of the park if you keep it open. So anyway, I just want to show my support for letting both the levy and the bond move forward so that give the citizens a chance to try to see some improvement in their parks. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Eric Wold, who will be followed by Roger Scaljo.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Wold, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Like all the people who talked before me, I'm here to support the 5-year local option levy that invests in parks and supports partnerships to enhance recreational opportunities. I have lived in Lane County for 25 years, and a big reason my wife and I decided to move here and raise our family here is because we value parks, natural areas, trails, and access to water. Lane County parks provide all of those things. They really are a key part of what makes this county a great place to live, work, and play. Parks like Buford Park and Mount Pisgah, Armitage Park, and the many river access points along the McKenzie River provide close to home nature opportunities and recreational opportunities that are critical to the health and well-being of people who live here. Many of my family's traditions revolve around Lane County parks. Every spring, we hike up to the top of Mount Pisgah, and perhaps more importantly, we hang out at the flank where the beautiful wildflowers are in bloom. We also walk along the Coast Fork Willamette River, paddle along the Coast Fork Willamette River routinely right by Armitage Park, right by Mount Pisgah. We also hit the McKenzie River, putting in at Lane County boat ramps routinely. My favorite run is on the map that Brett showed is Forest Glen Landing. It's way up by Blue River. I love putting in my kayak there and taking out either depending on how ambitious I am that day, right above Martin's Rapids or right below Martin's Rapids. But all the Lane County parks are in need of funding. As Brett described and other speakers have described, the parks really are in dire need of funding input to bring them to be safe and functional for all of us. Park staff and all the citizens, the task force members, the advisory committees, and the consultants have done a great job of assessing the situation and coming up with a really reasonable plan that I believe taxpayers are going to be willing to vote for. And I also represent the pickleball community, and I can tell you that there is a very, very motivated group of people who will be out to try to get this passed. In short, the levy will be a great return on investment for this community. And for these reasons, I encourage you to forward this levy to the voters for the November 8th election. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wald. Roger Scaljo, followed by Alicia Hayes.
My name is Roger Shalio, and I'm one of those pickleball players. But I've also been heavily involved with parks and recreation, environmental education, and very excited to see the cooperative programs that we're looking at, the fundings. I think that is just fantastic. In regards to the regional pickleball facility we're looking at. Pickleball, for those of you that may not know, has been mentioned today, the fastest growing sport in the country. I was one of the founding members of the Emerald Valley Pickleball Club in 2015 with 45 members, and we're about 650 members now, growing since April of this year. Of well over 100 members. So it's been going up recently. And as if you've seen on television commercials or magazine articles, pickleball is a lead story in many of them these days. The morning news is quite full of these kinds of reports on pickleball. And what we've seen locally and what seen around the country are the health benefits that the people with playing pickleball receive, the mental and emotional benefits, especially these last 2 years of people looking for connection, and pickleball provides that. We see people that have in between cancer treatments out playing pickleball. We see on the same court, same day, youth, 9 years old, playing with an 87-year-old, men, women, people with disabilities, playing every day. Our courts are quite full. We have also the plans on doing quite a few tournaments at this facility, which certainly affects the room tax. I just played in a tournament last weekend in Bend. They had over 600 players from, I believe there was 8 different states. And the estimated impact on that was $800,000. They have a 16-court venue. We're looking at a 24-court venue that would allow us to do regional kind of tournaments, large tournaments, bigger, larger than 600. So this is another reason that we're excited to do this. So I appreciate your time, and our pickleball club is there to help support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shalio. Next is Alicia Hayes, who will be followed by Joe Mall.
Oh, this feels familiar. Start yet, Diane. All right. Good afternoon. My name is Alicia Hayes, and it is really great to be back here in Harris Hall with you. Today, I'm here with this simple request to ask you to put the levy on the ballot. But I know it's not a simple request. I know it's one of the most difficult decisions you have to make as an elected official. Asking voters for more money is always difficult. You have asked yourself questions like, is the timing right? Is the mix of projects right? Are the services right? I'm sure there's a lot of other questions you've asked that I can't even come up with. But I have to say you have an advantage because you've done your due diligence. You have assembled the Parks Advisory Committee and the Parks Funding Committee to look at the Parks program and funding. And they have done an excellent job of assessing the services that are lacking, the deferred maintenance, and personally for me, the issues of ADA access. I've had a chance to talk to some of those committee members as they were going through the process, and they have shared they were impressed with the commitment of the committee and the time they took to do the work. In addition to the committee, the county has held public input sessions with larger than expected numbers of community members, mostly holding pickleball paddles, who came out to support the idea of a parks levy. But I have to say those pickleball players are also people that use the water systems as well as the trails and all the services. We have beautiful parks in Lane County, and they have been neglected, not by choice, but by lack of funds to support them. When funding for the county decreased through decision and tough decisions were made, parks saw that reduction in funding. This is our chance to support our parks and to help address the ADA access issues that can provide all visitors to the park equal opportunity to use the parks and all their facilities. I can't end my public comment without coming clean. I am the president of the Emerald Valley Pickleball Foundation. It's kind of a need to be in control. Some of you know that. And this is what I've chosen to do once that other job ends. And I'm just so happy to see that on the levy, that regional pickleball facility you've heard, but it's really on any given day when you go out to those pickleball courts, they are full, and they are full of a diversity of people, like has been talked about. I believe I've offered pickleball lessons to every one of you except Jay, because I'm pretty sure he's moving to Tennessee or somewhere. And he also looks like he could beat me. Not that you guys couldn't. But anyhow, I would say good luck, but you don't need it because you've done your work. And I believe this will be a success. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for the revisiting here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, former Health and Human Services Director, Alicia Hayes, and former County Administrator, Alicia Hayes. Next is Joe Mall, who will be followed by Janelle McCoy.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Mall. I do not yet play pickleball. Chair Farr, Commissioners, my name is, for the record, Joe Mall, Executive Director of the McKenzie River Trust. As a collaborating partner with Lane County at many levels, we encourage your support for the proposed local option levy for the Lane County parks in the upcoming election cycle. Because Lane County spans a large area from the Cascades to the coast, the diversity of lands within Lane County provide us all with incredible opportunities for recreation, relaxation, learning, and reflection. Current county park staff with current budgets do a commendable job attending to each of these public values in the park system today. With more investment in capital projects and program capacity as sketched out for you in this report this afternoon, people in the coming decades, and we know there will be many more people in the coming decades in Lane County, will be able to enjoy what we enjoy today. I was raised in suburban Louisville, Kentucky, moving west in the 1980s. I spent my childhood in a park system that was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, who was also behind such notable places as Central Park in New York and the U.S. Capitol grounds. He saw then what your park staff see now. People rely on open parklands to gather with friends and family, to celebrate and to honor each other, to test themselves and to test each other in competition, and to remind themselves of the splendors of the natural world and their place within it. Of course, since Olmsted's time, the uses of our park systems have become much more varied, at times much more intense, with new and different public demands and associated management headaches each year, it seems. Increasingly, those of us working in land management look beyond organizational boundaries to collaborative approaches and networks that make the most of our regional expertise, creativity, and financial resources available. The Rivers to Ridges partnership here in the metropolitan Springfield, Eugene area is perhaps one of the better known examples of that commitment. Teams come together across member organizations for a wide range of projects, from the nitty-gritty of weed management to the best practices for children's education, to how to manage fire in such a drastically changing landscape, to how to deal with unruly pickleball players. But the Rivers to Ridges partnership also operates at a very high level, with a vision that looks 10 years, 50 years, 100 years into the future. That has been a very productive exercise. When we are immersed in the immediate challenges of the day, it can be hard to think beyond the most urgent needs. I think it's natural for us to think that way. Many of the examples of the proposed benefits associated with the levy option are just that, needs of the day and some near-term opportunities. They need attention. But I also want to suggest that this action will provide some breathing room for your senior staff to be able to raise their heads up and really look ahead to a future when you and I are long gone. With every new resident and visitor to this region in the coming decades, and again, we expect those numbers to increase. Robust park systems will be at the heart of a welcoming, healthy, dynamic community. I encourage your support for the levy option to give county park staff the encouragement, that vote of confidence, and the logistical support to look ahead and create that future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mall. Next is Janelle McCoy, and after Ms. McCoy, I will ask Ms. Jones to administer the online queue.
Good afternoon. One of the things I worry about when I follow Joe Mall is will I have to adjust the microphone? And thank you, Joe, for not having me adjust the microphone. My name's Janelle McCoy. I'm the Executive Director for Friends of Buford Park and Mount Pisgah. I was also the chair of the funding task force for parks. In my private life, I'm a farmer and a sheep shearer, and I'll speak from both perspectives, in fact. But first, I want to thank all of you for your service to our community. I know these days are not easy to be a public servant, so thank you. I also want to thank Brett and his team and his staff for being such great collaborators with me, the staff at the Friends of Buford Park, and of course, Brad and the Arboretum as well. We couldn't do it without you, and I just want to recognize you for your efforts. Many of us are transplants to this area, and for those of us who are, I just ask you to reflect, what was it that brought you here? Why are you here? Is it the green space? The beautiful access to coast, to mountains? Is it the world-class arts? Is it the community? I would venture to guess that it's all of those and much more. And I want to stress green spaces, because that does speak to our quality of life. It's that certain something that you know is around the corner, or that you do have quick access to. You can go and gather, you can go and reflect, you can join others, you can find that mental health, you can find that physical health. Whatever that is, our green spaces are those things that encourage people to move here, encourage people to live here and work here. And those aspects are so important when we think about our tax base, which funds our government and our public services as well. Parks, our green spaces, our natural habitats. You know, our parks are our central parks in a variety of neighborhoods and cities, again, spanning a county that is large as the state of Connecticut. There's a lot special that is going on here. I implore you to consider adding this measure for our public to comment by their vote in November. There's so much more to enjoy about our parks if we had extra support in doing so. It's not from lack of trying from the Parks Department. They do miraculous work. But the only way that we can ensure that that future will be there for our parks and for our community is if we invite the public to support it in a deeper way, in a more resilient way, and in a longer term way. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Steve.
And thank you, Ms. McCoy. At this point, Ms. Jones, I'm going to ask you if you will administer the online queue.
Thank you, Chair Farr. At this time, I do see 3 people have signed up for public comment in the virtual format. I will call upon Michael Allen, followed by Bob Kiefer, and it looks like one person just dropped off. Michael Allen, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public testimony. And I do show you are self-muted. There you go.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Michael Allen. I live on the coast near Florence. And thank you for the opportunity to repeat my input that I gave this morning for this public hearing. I'm here today to give you my personal perspective of why I believe a levy for the Lane County Park is so important. I first came to Florence as a host at Harbor Vista Park with my wife, Pat, in 2014. While at Harbor Vista, I developed interpretive signs and programs and formed a friends group. Recognizing the value of education, we raised money for a sound system to support presentations at an amphitheater constructed by park staff. Pat and I love the interaction with the Florence community so much that we purchased a home not more than a 10-minute walk from the park. When the opportunity arose, I volunteered to be part of the Lane County Parks Master Task Force Plan for 2 years. My emphasis was on ensuring the plan included opportunities for educational experiences, like finding the largest Sitka spruce tree for kids in the Harbor Vista Park, and the formation of the Friends groups. I was then approached by one of the members of the Parks Advisory Committee, Pat Bradshaw, who was retiring. He asked me to apply for his position. I was fortunate to be appointed to the PAC by Commissioner Farr to represent coastal interests. I have served on the PAC for almost 2 years. During that time, I supported efforts to have Harbor Vista annexed into the city of Florence and have been an avid advocate for North Jetty Park to become part of the Lane County system. Most recently, I enjoyed meeting my commissioner, Jay Bosevich, at the ribbon cutting for the cabins at Harbor Vista. I thank Commissioner Bosevich for his support of the cabins and the future acquisition of nearby North Jetty Park. Throughout all my time serving the community and its parks in the county, I have learned how important it is to have a reliable and consistent revenue source. Our parks need constant upkeep, and we need to include more opportunities for outdoor and education and recreation. I therefore highly encourage the Board of Commissioners to approve the levy for Lane County parks. We can really rely on the folks in Florence who came out in force for the work session, and they will be there to actually support the levy when it's on the ballot. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker is Bob Kiefer, followed by Taryn Anderson. Bob, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Bob, there you go.
There we go. Good afternoon, Commissioners, Chair Farr. Thank you for having the
Lost your Bob.
We just lost him for a sec. Hold on, I'm gonna see if I can get him back on and we'll start his timer again. Bob, can you unmute your microphone?
How about that?
There you go, and I'm gonna restart your timer. There you go.
All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for having the public hearing today and giving me an opportunity to speak to you. I have to make a disclaimer up front that at this point, I'm just representing myself. I'm not representing county staff, the Special District Association of Oregon, who has employed me, and or my former employer, Willamette Lane Park and Recreation District. I provide this testimony very quickly for you today as a park and recreation professional for over 38 years. And of that 38 years, I spent 30 years in Lane County, and as you know, 10 years as your county parks manager in the 1990s. I'm really sorry I cannot be there today, but we had some family obligations over here and I could not join you. Many of the speakers today have already taken some of the thunder that I had in my points that I wanted to make to you, but I want to reiterate a few. And before that, I want to just say thank you to your leadership and thank you to Steve and Dan and Brett's leadership in this process. It's been just outstanding and a great group to work with. So these 3 points I have for you. This process has been a deliberate process, over 5 years in making, from the master plan to the task force, to the funding plan, to the deferred maintenance, to the 2 public opinion surveys, 4 stakeholder meetings, numerous meetings with partners to get finally to where we're at today. This is an enormous undertaking, and I'm not sure of any other organization that I've been involved with or have been with at any point in my career has taken this amount of time to get to a very thorough and understanding of what their needs are and how to support them. Second point, this levy proposal is sound. It's a building block for the future. The average homeowner is less than $40 a year in their support of a county park system. and it's always in line with the public surveys that we did. Let's let voters decide if they want to support the park system. And lastly, my third point, let's think about legacy. Legacy for you, but also those previous leaders that saw to the development and the acquisition of our park system. The Howard Bufords, the Maury Jacobs, the governors Straub and McCall, when we think about the Greenway and we think about Howard Buford Recreation in Mount Pisgah. These areas are key places that really support our quality of life in Lane County. I ask you to support our levy as it goes forward today.
Thank you, Mr. Kiefer.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, Karen Anderson, I do still see you out there, but it looks like you've lowered your hand. If you would like to give public okay, our next speaker will be Karen Anderson. Karen, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. There you go.
Thank you. And thank you to all the commissioners for being here today and also for all the speakers. I am appearing before you virtually. I am the president of the Mount Pisgah Arboretum, and I'm here to lend my voice with all the others to please ask the commissioners to put this levy before the voters of Lane County and to support it in any way you can. And I just want to say thank you so much to all of you for giving us this opportunity for all of the speakers to tell you about how much we love Lane County and the Lane County Park System. And, you know, I truly believe that Lane County is the most beautiful county in a state that has an abundance of outstanding natural areas. And we are so fortunate. And so here, I'm here to speak in support of allowing those parks in our natural areas to continue. Our parks are so important to so many people for so many different reasons. They're a place to recreate, to connect with nature, a place for people to meet, and for people to get away from others. Parks allow us to exercise conservation efforts and to share a love of the outdoors and of natural areas with new generations. As our county and as interest in outdoor recreation continues to grow, we must invest in our parks to make sure that they not only continue to exist, but also that they continue to meet the needs of a changing community and a community that recognizes the importance of evolving as we see needs evolve and as we recognize needs that previously went unmet. We can only do that if we support the parks through additional funding and through sufficient funding. So I'm asking the commissioners to please vote for this levy and to let the people of Lane County show you how much they value our parks and natural areas. So I want to thank the commissioners again for their time today. And also I want to thank the other speakers for being here and for sharing your support, because it's so wonderful when we can have so many people in the community speak up for something. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you for your public comment. Chair Farr, at this time, I have no one else in the queue for public comment, so I'll return the meeting to you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. And I'm going to take a moment to tell everybody why we're here. I probably should have told you a little bit before this, but pursuant to the Lane County Home Rule Charter, Article 7, Section 29, and Lane Code, Section 2.657/2.045.045, and the Oregon Revised Statutes and the Lane County Board of the Lane County Board of Commissioners has the authority to refer county measures to the voters for approval. The board is today considering referring a levy to provide funding for county parks. The materials on this measure have been part of last week's regular board meeting agenda and this week's regular board meeting agenda. This time has been properly noticed as the time set for public input on the potential referral of this measure. The hearing continues to be open and the board welcomes further comment. At this point, is there anyone else in Harris Hall who wishes to provide commentary on during the public hearing? I see none. Then I will close the public hearing. And at this point, I'll look to the board. Any questions or comments in response or in addition to public comment that we've received? I see none. Just one thing I'm going to say to you, Mr. Henry, your scavenger hunts. You put your kids on scavenger hunts. We've always done that with our three sons, and you know, they're pushing. They're in the mid-30s now, and they're getting a lot better at it.
I didn't figure out a way to get them out there.
And once they're there, boy, it sure is a lot of fun. Then we will move forward to the board. We have, excuse me one second. I'll look for a further comment.
Would you like a motion? So people, I'm guessing maybe people want to wait and speak to a motion. So I'm prepared
yes,
to
indeed.
offer that if you would like.
Let me, I'm going to get you the exact motion here. As soon as I get to my correct screen. To the board, we have before us order number 2208-0907 and the languages I stated earlier. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Vice Chair Trieger and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Discussion to the motion. I'm also looking to the screen for Commissioner Burney. Discussion to the motion. Commissioner Bozovich, followed by Commissioner Buck.
Thank you. First, I want to thank everybody that came to testify. Everybody collectively represents so many hours of volunteer effort for our parks and other organizations around the community, and a lot of knowledge. And I know a lot of work went into developing this proposal. I am not denying the need for the funding for the parks. I'm just questioning priorities and timing. I've expressed this questioning quite often publicly. We are sitting with a general fund that's structurally unbalanced. In fact, we have 4 funds that are considered financially distressed right now. Our general fund, our road fund, our land management fund, and our parks fund. As we sit with all these structurally unbalanced funds, we're now currently not charging minor felonies in this county due to lack of personnel resources because we can't compete in the marketplace right now for attorneys. We are being poached by other agencies that have more money. Deschutes County took our most recent DA, deputy DA. We have to understand why we're in this situation. And the fact that local option levies are is about the only tool we have to locally raise taxes. But the reason we're in this situation, why our parks have become what they are and why they have such a desperate need is the disinvestment by our state in mandated county services they require us to provide. From taxation and assessment, they used to support at over 70% of the cost of that service. It's now 30%. Our community corrections, which we decided to provide in 1995 under Senate Bill 1145, requires that the state provide a study every 6 years of how much it costs, but it doesn't require them to fund that cost. And they have never funded the actual cost of that service to Lane County. Our DA's office used to get enough support to completely pay the DA's salary and to pay for several deputy DA's salaries. Now we get a little over $90,000 and it doesn't even pay half of what the DA's total compensation is. Over and over again, the state has been disinvesting in our services. And at the same time, they continually pass unfunded mandates. They may not meet the criteria of the constitutional definition of an unfunded mandate, but every time they require us to do something that costs us more and don't provide that enough to fund the actual cost, it's an unfunded mandate. And it's death by 1,000 cuts. Most recently, they're offloading some of the state hospitals' requirements to take care of mentally ill people charged with crimes, and they're making us take care of those people. At the same time, our federal government has completely walked away from their responsibility for the over 55% of Lane County they owned and we can't tax. 5 years ago, when this effort started, we were close to a deal in Congress that would have placed the ONC lands in a trust and provided back that timber revenue. What built our Lane County park system? But we didn't push forward. And shortly after that, this board chose to pull us out of the association that was pushing for that deal. I cannot support putting this on the ballot. Knowing the crisis that's coming in our public safety system, priority wise, if I'm going to place something on the ballot right now, it's going to be for public safety. But the real thing is I am not willing to tax our local people to displace the lack of responsibility of our state and federal governments. I will be voting no on this motion, and I will be encouraging the citizens of Lane County to vote no on the levy.
Further discussion, Commissioner Buck?
Thank you, Chair. It's true that we are constantly working with limited resources in the county. That has been an issue for a long time. There are so many needs out there in our community and finite resources. Today, you've come to us with a solution on funding one of those really critical needs in our community, our parks and recreation, which we've come to love even more through the past few years of COVID. It has been our mental health reliever. It has been a place where we have solace, a place where we can exercise, and a place to just feel grounded. And this is really a critical need in our community. We come to a point where we've had such disinvestment in our county parks that we're really juggling which safety concerns to address first. And if the safety concerns become so severe, we continue to not have access to our parks anymore, or have to seriously consider consolidation of parks in our community. We don't want that. We will continue to find buckets of money for the variety of funds in which we need to make sure are shored up and have individual solutions that are specific to those departments. This is such a solution for this particular need. And for that reason, I support putting this on the ballot in November. I am excited to see things all over the county. I hear a lot about Baker Bay. I remember, as I'm born and raised here, I grew up at Orchard Point and Richardson Park. And for folks that have lived here for a really long time, we remember what it was like. And it's really disappointing to see what they've become over time through really no individual fault of any particular citizen. It's just a buildup of circumstances over the decades. And it's important for me as a mother to make sure that my child and the children of our community have the same experience that I had when I was a kid at our parks. And this is what this levy will help produce for our children. And I appreciate it being spoken of as a legacy, because that's truly what it is. If we want to have a system that is meant for a medium-sized county like ours, it is something that I will be out there supporting. And I know that there are areas in all sides of Lane County that have something exciting to look forward to in this levy. And I appreciate all the volunteers that have spent so many years. Clearly, we've heard from somebody this morning and this afternoon that has been involved for well over a decade in trying to make this happen. I know there are probably people in our audience who have thousands and thousands of hours because you care about our county. And I really want to say thank you for that. And I appreciate you bringing this forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Further discussion, Vice Chair Trigger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone who came to speak, and folks, if you're still on the line, who spoke to us virtually, folks that I've just spoken to in person out and about. I also want to really appreciate Brett Henry. When I first came on the board, we were all virtual. I wasn't able to participate in any in-person meetings, but the one thing I was able to do was go out and do a walk around at Armitage with Brett, and because it was outdoors and we could maintain some distance. One of the few opportunities I had to meet with a staff member and talk about their program in person and see it up close. So just wanting to appreciate that, because it feels like a million years ago now. And you know, we've been talking about this for a while. This is my first opportunity to take on something like this as a commissioner, but it's certainly not my first opportunity to think about parks, to think about the interconnection of our parks system as a system, and to think about our interconnection as a community with the natural world. And why it matters. And I do appreciate, I'll echo Commissioner Buck's comments, which echo, I think it was Mr. Mall who talked about this as legacy. You know, our job, at least the way I look at it, a big part of my job is to try to forecast into the future and say, what will folks 20 years from now look back at decisions this board made about what kind of shape the community's in. And I don't want to be someone whose time in office is looked back at as having missed opportunities to invest in our own assets that the community tells us they love and want protected and enhanced and are willing to pay for. That's part of the responsibility of living in community and in a organized society, is doing our share and paying it forward. I know we've had some conversation in past meetings on this topic as well about concerns because we have a public safety levy coming up in the spring. So the other thing I would say that I know about folks who appreciate parks and are sort of community minded is they're not going to forget this interconnection in the spring when it's time to support public safety. I really also appreciate that we're calling out some support with the sheriff's office because of the vital role that our sheriff's department plays in keeping the parks safe and clean. Again, interconnection. We had a long presentation this morning on our housing initiatives and serving unhoused folks, and there's impacts on having a large population of unhoused folks on our park system. We can't decouple our programs, our resources, our assets, or our commitment to each other. So while I fully appreciate Commissioner Bozovich's frustration and concerns, those are separate issues that we need to take up as well at separate times. We do that through legislation, our relationships with our delegation, and working with state and federal agencies and governments, and to try to replenish missing funding, but to not put this before voters who've asked us to do that doesn't fix any of the problems that were raised, and it certainly doesn't help our park system. So I'm happy to advance this. I'm happy to support it as a campaign, and I will be happy to see these improvements over time take place, because I use all of these parks and more that were mentioned and that will benefit from this. And again, I really do think we can't underestimate the interconnection. And if we invest in some parks with some of these dollars, it will just help catalyze investments and appreciation for other parks in the system. So very much appreciate everyone's time, thoughtfulness. It's not an easy decision to make, and it won't be an easy decision to make for a lot of voters as well. But that's our job, is to talk with folks about why this matters and how they'll benefit. And $38 a year is a pretty great bargain. So thank you, everyone, for your time. Thank you to staff. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trieger. Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. For those counting votes on the basis of commissioner remarks, I support this initiative. I would like to make a couple of comments. There is some truth in what my fellow Commissioner Bozovich said, but I think his reasoning or his conclusions are faulty, and I want to explain that. All commissioners, Chair Farr, Vice Chair Trieger, Commissioner Buck, and myself, have children that live in Lane County and use Lane County parks. Several of us have grandchildren that live in Lane County and use Lane County parks. Commissioner Bozovich, I appreciate the courage of your convictions, but you are leaving for Tennessee. You've got no dog in this race. You are not going to have to live with the consequence of this. And what are we voting on now? We're voting on whether we let the citizens vote. We're not voting to establish unilaterally a levy. And and I disagree that because Lane County has temporarily left the AOC, that the AOCC hasn't continued its work, and we haven't continued to be a part of that work. So, so for my children, for my children's children, and for my children's children's children that I hope to be here and enjoy our parks. I think the only rational, reasonable, and responsible thing that we can do after, as a body, before Commissioners Buck, Trieger, or I were even a part of this, that Board of Commissioners voted to move forward on developing a master plan. That group of commissioners voted to move forward on looking at finance, developing all this stuff that's occurred. Who are we to deny our citizens of Lane County the opportunity to vote for what they want their future in something as valuable and critical and for quality of life as parks to continue? So I enthusiastically support moving this forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. I'm going to say a few words before I go to the second round. You know what? Commissioner Bozovich talks about true things. It talks about the fact that there has been a disinvestment both by the state and by the federal government in the operations of Lane County. Nobody disagrees with that. That being said, we all know that our sheriff's department is underfunded. We all have read recently the DA is no longer prosecuting some minor crimes. And we all know that other agencies are paying attorneys, doctors, professional staff more than Lane County can and ever will pay. That's just the nature of it. But you know what? I was at a park this last Sunday with my 3 grandchildren, and they were playing in the park, and they're in the water, and they were splashing. My 3-year-old grandchild, I overheard this talking to my oldest son, said, "Daddy, me having a good day." Now, can we still have a good day even though we know that we need to do more for the police department, the sheriff's department? Yes, we can. Can we have a good day even though the DA needs more attorneys? Yes, we can. Can we have a good day even though we know we're not paying staff well enough? Yes, we can. And I believe that investing in our parks helps more kids to have a good day. And I'm putting that very, very simply. The words of a 3-year-old, it brings tears to my eyes to think about this. Here's a 3-year-old in a park splashing around with all the horrible things that you read about in the paper, with all the things that you see on the news. We can still have a good time in the park and still understand we have other obligations, other responsibilities, and we have to drive forward in other areas to fund the things that keep us safe. But in the meantime, I think we can still have a good day. So I am going to be voting in favor of this. And certainly it's personal. I spend a lot of time in parks. I live in the city of Eugene, as most of the people who will be voting on this live in the city of Eugene or Springfield. But you know what? I live 7 minutes from county parks. And certainly I can go to our local city park. I don't get the same things that I get at Fernridge. I don't get the same things that I get at Armitage Park. I don't get the same things I get on the Mackenzie boat landings or the things I will get at the Mackenzie Discovery Center. It's different things. And for a very short trip, people who live in the metropolitan area can enjoy it also. I think we're going to have a good day. I think we can still have a good day and still be heartbroken about what's happening with our public safety system. I think we can still have a good day and be heartbroken about the disinvestment by the state in county operations and the disinvestment by the federal government in the way we're able to build our revenue. We can do all those things. So I'm a yes. Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. I'm a little perplexed by Commissioner Burney using my desire to move back close to family after in the last term, I've lost my mother, my 2 older brothers, and I'll be moving closer to my remaining brother. And my wife lost her father. And we're moving close to her sister. I do have a dog in this fight. I came on this board at a time when we were in chaos in Lane County. We were in the middle of public records lawsuits. We were in the middle of lawsuits from employees. And we were looking at a 20% real dollar cut in our all funds budget from $600 million to $480 million. My legacy has been how I've stewarded the finances of this county and encouraged them to be stewarded. We now have the highest Moody's bond rating Lane County's ever had. We passed the sheriff's levy, the first in 14 attempts and 20 years, nearly a generation. And I've worked extremely hard on the public safety side to try and rebuild our public safety system. Everybody remembers the 911 call from Josephine County in May of 2013. If you don't, Google it. After that went public and made national and international news, travel and tourism to Oregon dropped significantly. People canceled reservations when they heard that woman call 911 wanting help, and they could not send anybody. And eventually her ex-boyfriend assaulted her and raped her while she was still on the phone with 911. I have the ability to sit back and look at our overall finances. I've also been watching the overall finances of this country and the state. We are going to be in hard times in the relatively near future. The ARPA money will run out. The impacts of the inflation that's caused will continue. And we're facing this disinvestment. I cannot, in good conscience, ask the voters to expend some of their precious resources on what I consider the fourth down in the list as far as priority goes for our distressed funds. General funds first, because that's where all of our public safety comes from. 70% of that goes to public safety. Roads are next. We can't, our economy can't survive without good roads. People's ability to get permits to build housing, that's pretty important. Going swimming for the day, I put that kind of down the list. I'm sorry, that's just where I am. And I've enjoyed lots of Lane County parks. I live very close to them. In fact, I was parked in one just the other day. You know, I mean, I kayaked Fern Ridge from the Camas access. I use our park system. That's not the question. The question is, what is going to be most important in the relatively near future? And the legacy I want to leave is a strong financial Lane County and a Lane County that has a strong public safety system, because everything else falls apart without that. And yes, there's $750,000 thrown in to be shared for the sheriff's office, and it's not purely all patrol. Part of it that's for work crews. So understand that, to do maintenance in the parks. We need to think about where our priorities are and what we want to ask voters to spend their money on. And at the same time, we also need to think about what we're doing that takes pressure off our state legislators and the governor, and takes pressure off of our federal delegation and our president to meet their responsibilities to Lane County and the citizens of Oregon. We passed this levy, and we put it, and I really wish that the local media would actually cover some of this so people could understand what I understand. Commissioner Burney, you lamented this morning about the loss of a local newspaper. We don't have local media that covers Lane County at all anymore. People really aren't aware of why the DA can't charge DUII, low-level DUII right now. And to me, that's not just a low-level crime. You could kill somebody. So I'm, a little taken aback about, not being concerned about legacy. I am very concerned about legacy. And my legacy has been the financial stewardship and being a strong advocate for public safety. And part of that's also being a strong advocate for the state to meet their responsibilities and the federal government to meet theirs. And I'm not going to ask our citizens to take up that responsibility. And I'm not going to make it easy for them to continue to shirk that responsibility by asking for a very low cost levy, which adds to compression under Measure 5, 47, and 50, and takes up more of that space where we might be able to expand the public safety levy next spring to actually put some sheriff deputies on the street, or just to make up for the fact that all of our costs are going up. All of our costs. We're going to have to do something incredible in our DA's office to hang on to staff as far as raising salaries goes. And we're going to have to continue to do that in our sheriff's department and our parole and probation department and our youth services, health and human services all across the county. So I'm sorry if people, might think I'm running away to Tennessee. I have reasons why I'm leaving. It's family reasons, but I still strongly want to leave a legacy here, and a legacy of good financial management and a strong public safety system.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. I see no further comments from the board, at which point, without further comment, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, let's remind you what we're voting on. Ever so quickly here. We are voting on order number 22080907 in the matter of referring to the voters of Lane County, a 5-year local option levy that invests in Lane County parks. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
Passes 4-1. Commissioner Bozovich in the negative. Then we'll move forward, Mr. Mokrajski, with item 11B, which is complementary to this last order that we just passed, and it's order number 22080908 in the matter of updating the appointments to a committee of residents tasked with drafting an impartial, simple, and understandable explanatory statement for the November 8th, 2022 voters pamphlet regarding the question of a 5-year funding levy to support the Lane County Parks Division. And Mr. Mokrajski, I'll ask you to introduce your panel and introduce the topic.
Thank you, Chair. This is a cleanup item. Last week, the board approved the order appointing the committee, and Mr. Robert Warren, who was one of the members appointed, is no longer able to participate and has been removed from the committee roster. So this is a cleanup item. I'm not sure, Brett, if you have any other comments, or Devin, any other comments, Devin? Devin Ashbridge, our public information officer, has been the lead on pulling together the explanatory statement committee. So
Yes, Chair Farr. Shortly after the board approved last week's order, Mr. Warren unfortunately informed me he would not be able to participate. The board does need to seat a minimum of 3 committee members and a maximum of 5. Without Mr. Warren's participation, we only had 2 members on the committee. So this order adds 2 new people for a total of 4. I'm hedging my bets a little bit better this week, and also notes that Mr. Warren will not be participating.
So to the 4, just to note for those watching, the 4 individuals are Greg James, Cindy Land, Arthur Farley, and John Clark are the 4 appointed to the committee.
Excellent. Questions, comments from the board? Vice Chair Trieger.
I was just prepared to.
I'm ready for a motion, then any discussion can come to the motion.
Great, thank you. Then I propose we move on order 22-08-09-08 in the matter of updating the appointments to a committee of residents tasked with drafting, etc.
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Trieger and seconded by Commissioner Burney. Discussion to the motion. I am seeing no discussion, then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. I'm going to thank you. Thank you, Ms.
Devin, yeah.
I was going to thank Ms.
Devin and Brett,
walking away from me.
I was hoping you were looking at me.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So with that, Ms. Mokrajski, we're going to move down the agenda. We will have an executive session today. Prior to the executive session, we will, let's see, move along to Commissioner's business. 12A announcements. Do we have any announcements from the board? Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I just neglected this morning. I just wanted to make sure anyone watching from the public knows this Saturday is the Pride in the Park Festival, the annual free event at Alton Baker Park. I believe 11 to 6 are the hours. If you Google Eugene Pride, you'll find a list of all the events and entertainment and lots of nonprofit agencies that are tabling there. If you want to know what inclusion looks and feels like, come on down to Pride in the Park on Saturday and enjoy the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Further comments? Seeing none, I'm just going to mention that while Mr. Hoyt is still here, I got a phone call from Mr. Hoyt last week that we had a large tree blocking the Mackenzie River just above Mackenzie Bridge. It was visible from the highway, and I want to commend Mr. Hoyt for marshaling the forces and getting everybody together and getting that tree out of the way. So now the Mackenzie River up that stretch is once again safe. Mr. Hoyt, thank you for all of that work that you do. And I'm glad you stuck around for that. Very good. Any further items from the board? Then we'll move along to future board assignments and requests. We got a little bit of telegraphing went on this morning, Mr. Mokrowski. Commissioner Bozovic.
Yeah, I'd like for head nods to have staff look at the IGA between the city of Eugene and Lane County relative to enforcement and zoning issues in the urban growth boundary of Eugene to make sure that there is a place in there for a process for some kind of appeal and variance process that's set up and not have finger pointing. It's there. Yeah, we need to know who's responsible for that and make sure there's process in place. And if there's not, we need to negotiate one into that IGA. So if I can get 3 head nods to have staff look into that.
Is that a report back?
Yeah, I would assume so.
Okay.
You got mine.
Thank you. It looks like you have a full contingent of head nods on that one. Anything else? I have 2. Then Ms. Mokrowski had mentioned this morning 2 things. One was regarding moving ahead. Moving ahead, thank you, which is the LTD process for considering 5 of their route corridors and enhancements. And the question that I had, and it's a kind of a vague one because I'm kind of vague on this. 4 of the corridors are inside the cities of Eugene and or Springfield with no Lane County facilities. In some cases, they do serve some Lane County population that are adjacent to the facilities, but those aren't our facilities. We were not asked to participate in the discussion. We didn't have a vote in whether or not to move forward with it. It was LTD's board, which is a governor-appointed board, and the Eugene City Council, which is elected. Is there anything we can do, Ms. Mokrowski, or can I ask you to come back with a report on that or questions on that? Looks like you're nodding your head.
So Chair, and I always appreciate the heads up earlier in the meeting because it gives me an opportunity to connect with staff. And I did reach out to Mr. Adams and Mr. Kyler. And the suggestion is actually that we invite LTD to present to the board on the moving ahead effort, that there's likely an opportunity for the board to provide a written comment. There will be, as I understand it, what Mr. Adams has shared with me, is that there hasn't been a final decision. It really is a coordinated effort between LTD and the city of Eugene, and that there are going to be many points in the future for the board to weigh in. And so asking LTD to come forward and do a presentation on what's happening and then allowing for the board to provide some preliminary feedback and ask questions would be maybe a good first step. So if you're agreeable to that, maybe head nods to that effect.
Mm-hmm. And I'll state, Mr. Mokrowski, that Pat Walsh, who is the local government affairs director for LTD, tried to call me during my lunch break. During our lunch break, I was unable to answer that. So he may be a contact for you to get a hold of as well. Meantime, I'll respond to his call. Thank you for that one. Anything further on that? Any discussion? So at some point in the...
Are there head nods for that? Did you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you got
so
all 5.
We'll make that an assignment. I'll do a review of assignments to invite LTD to do that presentation.
And I would suggest post haste on that, in that it seems to be moving ahead as we speak. So, the second one was regarding the aforementioned issues that we have in our district attorney's office, losing attorneys as recently as this week to other jurisdictions, predominantly to DOJ, but also now to other counties. And Ms. Mokrowski, my question was probably a little bit more vague on that, is what is it that where can we begin a discussion to help the DA and their quest, the DA's office in their quest to attract and retain staff?
Right. So on that one, I did, I think I shared with you last week, but I'll just share again. And I did connect with Alana Holmes, our Human Resources Director, again today. Our Human Resource Director did reach out to the district attorney last week. The DA has been off for the past week and is back in the office, I believe, today. So we have not had the opportunity to connect directly, but we have had some discussions, and we will be pursuing further discussions about opportunities for similar type of incentive related retention and recruitment opportunities that we've done in other places of the organization. So that's a conversation. While we did just settle in the last year a 3-year contract with the prosecuting attorneys, we certainly can take a look at the classification in question. I think it's the Deputy District Attorney 2 is the classification. It's the DA has expressed that they haven't had a difficulty in recruiting for the entry level DDA 1 positions, but it's the DDA 2s once they gain that experience that they've struggled to retain. So we can do that. I think we also are having some conversations with our policy team about opportunities to, as several of you have commented, the state has failed. They have succeeded in funding DOJ, the Department of Justice, and the attorneys that work for that department, as well as additional funding for the State Public Defender's Office, but have not adequately funded local public safety systems. So we are looking at opportunities to go to the legislature and express these concerns and pursue some additional funding, at least in the short term. So that's a conversation that we're having with our policy team. So both of those tracks are being discussed. Both how do we look at immediate recruitment and retention needs, as well as the longer term, short term and longer term funding needs for the DA's office.
Very good. So we've not had the head nods yet. So what I'm asking for, I guess, is that dialogue between you and the district attorney's office to determine what can we do, whether it be additional incentives or whether it be pressuring a funding organization, which is a state. And there's not much we can do about them poaching, because that's kind of the nature of things. Wherever you are, people are looking for your trained staff, whether you're at, well, I'm not going to go into the list, but and you mentioned it's the DA2, the assistant 2, trained staff, worked here for quite some time, or worked someplace for quite some time, well enough to be able to be proficient at their work. Very good. So do we have head nods on that?
Yeah, could I say something, Chair?
Certainly, please, Commissioner Burney.
I just want to, you absolutely have my head nod, and I just want to say that, the previous discussion notwithstanding, I completely agree with commissioners, including Commissioner Bozovich, that for the state to fund the State Department of Justice, making it more difficult for local DAs to prosecute, to have access to employees, is the most incomprehensible and indefensible thing I can imagine. So I'm just venting and agreeing with you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Commissioner Buck.
A clarification, is this also a report back so we can continue to keep informed of the process, or is it something different?
I think it would be a report back, Ms. Smoker, and probably by the time we meet again, if you accept this assignment, which I don't know how you can't accept it if you say yeah. But a report back maybe as quickly as the August 23rd or 22nd, whatever it is, the next board meeting. And it may not be anything conclusive at that time, but just report on how the progress is going. Vice Chair.
Thank you. I just want to give leeway. I don't want to put a date to it in case if this involves district attorney herself, we can't assign her something for her schedule. So I just want to make sure we're building in the flexibility so that the assignment can be met, but that we get the information that we need.
Yeah, again, we've done the outreach, and the DA has been out of the office and is just back now. And so we'll have those conversations and look at what opportunities we have. We also can report to the board on, we've, as a county, we have the board and in our proposed budgets and approved and adopted budgets over the past 8 years provided increased funding for the district attorney's office. So we've only made more of an investment in our limited property tax dollar in assisting in adding positions. We've added several deputy district attorney positions and paralegal positions, including in this adopted budget. So we're doing what we can do with the limited resources that we have available. And I think the primary concern that's been expressed here about really needing to go to the state and say that this is not a workable model and we need more help, is inevitably going to be at least sort of a mid to longer term solution that we're going to have to pursue.
Then seems as though we do have head nods on this. So thank you. Any further future board assignment requests? Seeing none, sometimes you have 0, sometimes you have 1. Today you have 3, Mr. Mokrowski. So
yes, I think that's so Commissioner Bozovich's request to have a report back from staff on a review of the IGA with the city of Eugene for the urban growth boundary regarding enforcement and zoning issues and whether or not appeals and variances are allowed for or not. So that's 1. And then Commissioner Farr's 2 requests to invite LTD to present on the, is it moving forward?
Moving ahead.
Moving ahead. Thank you. The moving ahead EMX expansion effort and separately to for staff to report back on the district attorney's staffing concerns that have been expressed.
any corrections, additions, supplements? That sounds like you've nailed it, Mr. Mokrowski. Then moving forward, that concludes today's business other than an executive session. And at this point, board, I'm going to read us into the executive session. At the sound of my gavel, we will recess the Board of County Commissioners and we will reconvene in remote executive session. Those of us who are present in the building will retire to our own offices for the session, and we'll see you in that session. So with that, no, I actually have it here. But
language.
Chair Farr, would you like me to read in the language?
You know, no, thank you.
Okay.
Board of Commissioners will meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations and to consult with counsel regarding the rights and duties of a public body with regard to the current litigation. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602D and H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise.
Chair Farr, if I may step in for 1 second and correct that, we will not be meeting in executive session to carry on labor negotiations. We will only be meeting for ORS 192.6602H, which is to meet with counsel regarding the rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation.
Thank you, Diana. You were quicker than I was.
Thank you, Mr. Dingle.